Good evening and welcome to the Business of Politics. I'm Leslie Camise Young, and tonight we are broadcasting from TSG Studios in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. Joining me this evening are political contributors Derek Gabriel and Melanie Turnbull. We have a full lineup in our election 2020 discussion, during which we will recap this year's ballot results, the winners and almost winners, and conversations about what's next for them in 2021. Special guests on this evening's program include Governor Albert Bryan Jr.'s Chief of Staff, Carl Knight, the Virgin Islands Legislature's Executive Director, Pamela Richards, and St. Croix Senator-elect Genevieve Whitaker. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. This Monday, November 16th, the Virgin Islands Board of Elections certified the 2020 general election. That means that come January 2021, 15 members of the 34th Legislature of the Virgin Islands will be sworn in to serve. This was a spirited election that, quite frankly, was full of surprises in both districts, with a record number of registered voters casting their early ballots and standing in long lines to unequivocally tap the candidates who are most equipped to lead the territory in a political, economic, and social period that is unprecedented in the Virgin Islands. Derek, Melanie, for me, elections are all about the numbers. I really enjoy looking through the different types of data, the demographics that came out to vote, what parts of the various islands have voted. And this election, I actually was not surprised with the turnout. According to the Board of Elections official certification, 33.99% of voters voted in this election. That, quite frankly, is a disappointment. And while I knew there were long lines at polling places on St. Croix and St. Thomas at the end of the day, and they seemed to be overwhelmed, and I heard from members of the board, we're going to have record turnout. That is not record turnout in the Virgin Islands. What do you think is a contributor to that?
You know, I really think that the COVID-19 pandemic had more to do with it than we could have anticipated, because I think the national election brought a lot of excitement, so I expected to see the same numbers that we saw in 2018 and 2016, but we simply didn't. But our voting population is majority older people. It's the older population, right, and those are the most susceptible to the pandemic. So I think taking that into consideration, some people just weren't willing to risk it, and I think with the consolidation of the voting polls, people just, I think they were scared, and so they didn't turn out to vote.
Right. And you know, Leslie, I think what also contributed to our down numbers was this was a midterm election year. Typically, you don't see that excitement locally in a midterm election year. I think to Melanie's point, if we had really seen that excitement from the national election trickle down, you would have seen an uptick in numbers. I do think the pandemic played a role, but I also think just overall people were a little fatigued this year. People really didn't want to take that chance, and they just wanted to really stay inside, stay safe as much as possible, and stay healthy.
Well, quite frankly, believe it or not, this is a growing trend that has started to take place since 2010. In fact, locally, we as a municipality had some of the highest turnout numbers in the Virgin Islands, ranging from 60 to 70% turnout, especially in gubernatorial years. And even in off-gubernatorial years, we'd still level out at 50% plus. Wow. Since 2010, our numbers have been trending downward. And you mentioned older people being the major voting bloc here in the Virgin Islands. If you look at people ages 35 to 65, they are registered 2 to 1, almost 3 to 1. Over individuals that are 18 to 35. So therefore, the fact of the matter is they are the majority, but even they are not turning out to vote. And when you look at 33.99% of the individuals determining the leaders of this territory, I think there's an alarm that has been sounded.
Yeah, and I really think we've got to, as a community, you need to see that trend of beginning to get our younger people involved at an earlier age. You know, Leslie, I always say that from the time I was in the single digits, 8, 9 years old, my mom was always working at the election polls. So she always took me there so I could experience the democratic process firsthand. It led to an excitement so that now I don't miss an election. I feel like it's my civic duty because I get the importance. And as you said, there should never be an opportunity where less than 35% of the population is choosing that direction that we're going to be headed in for the next 2 years or even longer.
It is a situation where the minority is making the decisions for the majority.
Right.
And we talked in our first episode about some of the contributing factors and how they were actually used and are being used on the national level. It's almost like Donald Trump took a page out of the Virgin Islands book, because for years we've had people, and up to a couple of days ago, I listened to somebody on talk radio disparaging the Board of Elections, questioning the integrity of elections down here, the black box scenario.
Right.
That is play for play what Donald Trump is now trying to do in Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, in terms of trying to discredit the eligibility of an election. And I got to tell you, I have never bought into that. But people here have bought into elections being rigged.
Right. I think the technology piece is really something that, especially for, again, our older populace, just it begin that the fear of the unknown, right? It's always there. It's always a stigma. But again, I think we need to see the Board of Elections really get out there, see some of our board members really have a public information campaign where people get more familiar, or we get out to some of the places where our senior citizens are and bring the information to them.
So guys, let's talk about who's in and who's out. Yeah. Top vote getter in the St. Thomas St. John district was Donna Fred Gregory with 4,855 votes, followed by Janelle K. Sauro with 4,827 votes, Milton Potter, 4,481 votes, Carla Joseph, 4,102 votes, Marvin Blyden, 4,065 votes, Alma Francis Heiliger, 4,017 votes, and Dwayne DeGraff with 3,538 votes. And on St. Croix, of course, the top vote getter there was none other than Senator Kurt Viale. And Senator Kurt Viale had 4,852 votes. So we see some parity between St. Thomas's top vote getter and St. Croix. Genevieve Whitaker followed with 3,898 votes. Novelle Francis fell to third place, 3,799 votes. Javon James with 3,735 votes. Franklin Johnson, a newcomer, 3,437 votes. Samuel Carrion, 3,394 votes, and Kenny Gittens with 3,322 votes. We had incumbents Oakland Benta and Allison Digazan put out of the legislature. And on St. Thomas, we had incumbents Bobby Thomas and Stedman Hodge. What's your take on that, Melanie?
I think it's very interesting that those first-term and one-term senators were all Democrat. So, sorry, can we start over?
You want to just go from that part? Just go from that part. Okay.
Okay.
So, Melanie, what's your take on that?
I thought it was very interesting that the incumbents that lost, they were first-term senators and one-term senators, and they were all Democrats.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It goes back to the conversation about unifying the party in order for them to make their agenda. So
again, just to piggyback off of that, I think it's also very interesting where the newcomers fell. They didn't just scrape in. They actually came in with a substantial amount of votes. It shows that not only were they working in the off years, but also the name recognition. You had some of these folks that had held public office before, and they really tried to use an opportunity to capitalize off of that. So I think that also shows that not only was our electorate paying attention, but to your point, Melanie, the Democratic Party seems to be losing a little bit of luster.
I saw a lot of older voters talk about the amounts of votes that the top vote getters got, like going back to years where the top vote getters would get 7,000 plus votes, but we haven't seen those numbers. But we have more in this program, so stay tuned to the Business of Politics.
The 2020 election saw surprises in the number of mail-in ballots and early voter turnout, which could be a sign that despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, Virgin Islanders were committed to having their voices heard in this year's election. Registered voters of the territory sent a strong message that they are ready for serious political change and solutions to combat the issues that the Virgin Islands is currently facing. Some new, many of which go back decades. One thing the public may be curious about is, with a commanding majority, how will Democrats lead a cohesive, unbiased agenda? Our team sought some answers from both the executive and legislative branches of our government.
Here we are on the beautiful island of St. Croix at the People's House, Government House, where we'll have an opportunity to talk to Governor Bryan's Chief of Staff and Senior Policy Advisor, Carl Knight, about the results of the 2020 elections and the impact this could have on the Brian Roche agenda moving forward. We'll also talk about the opportunities that he will have to work with the 34th Legislature of the Virgin Islands to push the agenda forward.
Carl, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. We really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Derek.
I know it's a really busy time for you, so we'll
Always
jump
is.
right in it. Right. So, Carl, of course, we're coming hot and heavy off the 2020 elections, the midterm elections. A lot of changes there. You're seeing some new faces. Just give us your overall general thoughts on the election.
Democracy in action. It's always good to get a little bit of new blood, and it's always good to retain a little bit of the veteran blood. I think that's exactly what we have in the Senate this time around. So that's very exciting. And so we look forward to working with the 34th Legislature. We still have some unfinished business to wrap up with the 33rd, but certainly we're looking forward to the 34th and what that can bring.
So, Carl, shifting focus a bit, how do you see the Brian Roche's top, let's say, two priorities on their meshing with the incoming Senate's legislative agenda? How do you see those kind of working, again, to advance the people of the territory, regardless of where they work or where they sit?
Well, I think it probably falls in, if you limit me to two. Right now, I have to say, first and foremost on our mind is the government employees retirement system. Notwithstanding everything I just said, that pension system affects a large cross-section of our community. The annuities that are paid out from that pension system help support the private sector, help patronize private sector businesses. A lot of families are dependent on that retirement income. And of course, our seniors who have retired, they're dependent on having a functioning pension system that lasts as long as they do. I think second on his agenda is ultimately, the governor doesn't like to be in debt to people and, paying his bills. And I think there's still some outstanding things, as I mentioned, income tax refunds. There's the 8% pay cut that was taken from public sector workers a little while back. There's certain economic obligations of the government that have not been met over the years. And so he's very keen on making sure that as the opportunity presents itself, that we meet those economic obligations of the government so that the government is not chronically in debt to the people of the Virgin Islands.
So, Carl, I think this administration has been in a very unique position, right? I don't think any administration, well, let's back up. Every administration can point to one major defining problem that they've had to deal with. That's really been that moment of sink or swim, right? This administration is unique in that you're actually dealing with a global pandemic that had such a large impact on one of our major economic contributors in tourism. Carl, just for a moment, tell us about this administration's impact and how we've been dealing with the coronavirus, if you can.
So clearly it was an unexpected occurrence. I mean, not in your best planning and strategic thinking can you imagine that you're going to be hit with a global pandemic in your second year in office. I think the governor responded, very, very quickly. I think very assertively. I think the apparatus of government works the way it should work. And hats off to our Department of Health, who served as the incident commander in responding to this unprecedented issue that we had to deal with as a people.
So, Carl, lastly on the pandemic, I know as we're moving into the winter, there is a global concern with flu season coming up, just moving into the overall cold season. There's going to be a rise in cases. Now, I know so far the Virgin Islands has even gotten national kudos for how we've been able to maintain a low rate, especially in this second phase, if you will. Just give us a quick, how do you see the healthcare system and the hospitals being prepared for this possible third surge?
So we were very nervous back in March because we weren't prepared back in March. We didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the beds in the ICU. We didn't have the ventilators. We didn't even have drugs to treat COVID patients. We were worried about surges and quickly overrunning our hospital system. On St. Croix, we were still dealing with a modular, not even a modular, we were still dealing with the hurricane damaged hospital, trying to get our modular hospital up and running. And so we weren't ready back in March. You know, I'm pleased to say that we've done the things to build capacity. We've gotten the ventilators in. We've built the surge capacity at Roy Lester Snyder Hospital. We've built out a whole area at the Armory, the National Guard Armory on St. Croix, that in the case that we have a surge that exceeds our capacity at the hospital, we can move patients to the Armory. It's set up and waiting for them, thanks to the Army Corps. We have the physicians and the nurses and the medical staff that we need just to staff such an emergency. The COVID task force takes very diligent census of how many patients are in our hospitals and in our ICU wards every single morning. So we keep track and tabs as to how we're doing capacity-wise. We have the treatment drugs. We are in a much better position. I think the public should rest well at night knowing that we're prepared. We can handle what's to come just as well as any other state or city in this country.
I think that's really encouraging to hear. And again, a lot of us have seen this play out over the last few months. And I do want to just take a moment to thank our first responders that have really been on the front lines, the people that have never stopped, as you said, the nurses that continue to go out there and take care of patients in our hospitals. You know, I think it's really important. So Carl, taking a step back from the coronavirus and the pandemic, earlier you mentioned that the administration has some unfinished business. If you can, just briefly tell us how you plan to work with the legislature to make sure that you're getting those across the finish line here in the next 2 years.
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of commonality that we can all agree that there's certain things that we need to champion and move forward. So we have a Behavioral Health Act, a very comprehensive piece of legislation that addresses mental health care in the Virgin Islands. I think we can all agree that that's something that ought to move forward. We've had some town halls on that, and we think that's a great piece of legislation. We have other bills like the merger of the fire department with the EMS service to allow firemen and women to respond to medical emergencies. We think that reduces response time. We think that's a win-win for the community. It augments the staff of EMS that's usually sort of understaffed. It provides a whole new set of training and other opportunities to them. So we think that's something we can move forward on and we can get some consensus on. There's a corporations and trusts legislation that we've put forward that sort of changes our corporation laws so that they mirror or are closer to what you would see in like Delaware, for instance. We think can be an economic development boost to our territory. So we have several pieces of legislation. There's reciprocity for nurses, so we can accept nurse licensure from other places, so we can help augment our staff at our medical facilities. We have a telemedicine act in this new virtual world, right, to allow people to be able to avail themselves of getting opinions and guidance from physicians that aren't necessarily within the territory. There's several things that we think are fairly low-hanging fruit that we think we can easily build some consensus on that's in the best interest of the public, and we certainly want to move forward on that. We do have some other things like the adult use cannabis and some other things that may be deemed to be a little bit more debatable and controversial, but we think there are we have a lot of legislation out there that we feel is in the best interest of the public, and we can quickly gain some allies in the legislature to move and champion for us.
Carl, again, it sounds like not only do you have your work cut out for you, but you've really given some thought to how you're going to address these next 2 years. Of course, this is an important 2 years, not only for the Brian Roach administration, but also for the incoming Senate. I thank you very much for your time today. Really looking forward to seeing all the great things that you have coming up, and all the best.
Thank you for the interview.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So it was great to really spend some time with Governor Bryan's Chief of Staff, Carl Knight, and really see where the Brian Roach agenda is headed for the next 2 years, especially as they're rounding the corner to a re-election, but also how they see that aligning with the 34th legislature's agenda. It was really interesting to listen to that. What do you think, Melanie?
Well, You know, the last term, the governor had some problems as far as corralling the Democratic Party and getting them on one page, because we saw early on a coup was formed, and people were ousted and new people were placed in. And so I'm interested to see what happens around in this cycle. Right. I think time will tell whether that agenda will actually be executed.
Well, having a record number of Democrats elected in the St. Croix district last election cycle and not being able to push forward a Democratic agenda is actually a failure. And let's be honest, the function of a political party is to elect individuals. But this Democratic Party of the Virgin Islands has failed to be the economic power that's behind elections. Senators are out there fending for themselves. Right. And once you have to fend for yourself, you're accountable to no one. Right. So there's no accountability to the party. And so I feel that Governor Albert Bryan Jr. is going to have a tough hill to climb, because there is no allegiance to the party. The party is quite frankly weak and has been for years. And although people use the banner to get elected, the full function of the party is non-existent.
So Leslie, you know, I've actually got a little bit of faith, because I think what we saw, as Melanie alluded to, last year we had a midstream coup, and you saw some of those Democratic majority leaders, particularly Senator Marvin Blyden, come at the bottom of the pack in the Democratic primaries. I think that sent a loud, strong message. I think now with the governor having a situation where, as a titular party head, he's actually got a bulletproof majority in the Senate if he can galvanize them. I think you're going to really see those politics begin to be at play. He's really got to go out there and show them how the next 2 years can help as they're rounding a corner. Because again, it's all about being reelected, right?
Yeah, but I think it also plays on the Democrats that were elected, because it's not enough to just have a majority, but you have to have a strong majority of people that will stand behind you and will support you and will push forward the legislation that you bring down. And so sometimes you can have the numbers, but if you don't have the strength and the substance within that particular elected official, nothing will happen.
Let's face it, how many senators you really think sit back and say, how will my agenda fit into what the governor is doing? Right. I think that is a major question that needs to be answered. And I think that doesn't happen very often. In fact, I doubt very highly that there's an approach of the governor, the delegate to Congress, when thinking about legislation and proposals that are being put forth. Look at what's going on right now with Bill 330330 from Novelle Francis and the community uproar about that legislation. Now, I can't say for sure what research has gone into to proposing this bill, but the public outcry, and so far the St. Croix Chamber of Commerce has spoken out in opposition to this bill. I very seriously think the St. Thomas Chamber is going to do the same thing. And the governor has come out and said he supported the bill, but right now community opposition is at an all-time high.
Well, you know, Leslie and Melanie, I'll say one thing. The Democratic Party here locally always brands himself as the People's Party, right? I think it's time for now the people's agenda to become the Democratic Party's agenda. Irrespective of what office they hold, whether it's the top office in the land, a legislative office, or even one of the boards and commissions. It's time for everyone to get that agenda aligned so that we can push forward on behalf of the people of the territory, right? It's time for us to really get those bread and butter issues at the forefront.
I agree. I think it's time for us to unite as a people. And I think that if the Democratic Party can get it together, they can be the party to unite the Virgin Islands and push us forward.
There's no question, with 50,000 plus voters, there's no reason that the Democratic Party should be weak at any point in the Virgin Islands.
Right. So folks, again, we're staying tuned. We're really looking forward to seeing what the Democratic Party can do on behalf of you, the people of the territory. Stay tuned, because we've got more.
A record 131 women currently serve in the 116th Congress of the United States, 105 in the House and 26 in the Senate. And for the first time in U.S. history, a woman has been selected to serve in the second highest position in our government, with California Senator Kamala Harris as the Vice President-elect of the United States of America. And, not surprisingly, the U.S. Virgin Islands is following suit, with women commanding almost 50% of the wins on the total ballot in this year's election. VI Democratic Senator Donna Fred Gregory and Independent Senator Janelle Sarro, both representing the St. Thomas District, were re-elected as the number 1 and 2 vote-getters respectively. Also joining them in the Senate's chambers come January 2021 will be newcomers Alma Frances Heiliger, Carla Joseph, and St. Croix's Genevieve Whitaker. For more on this conversation, I met with someone who has had a bird's eye view for some time on policymakers. I asked her how she anticipated the growing number of women in leadership positions would change policymaking in the Virgin Islands. Good day, I'm Melanie Turnbull, and today I'm here at the legislature to have a discussion on the continuing trend of elected women policymakers. Joining me for that discussion will be Executive Director, a woman leader in her own right, Pam Richards, to talk about the impact that this will have on the upcoming term. Welcome, Ms. Richards.
Thank you.
It is so nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to sit down and take some time with you to talk about what we're seeing as a mainstay of elected women policy makers. We're going to have 5 women senators in this upcoming term.
Isn't that wonderful?
It is. We saw that the down ballot was majority women, and we're now hearing rumors that we may have our 3rd woman Senate president.
Yes, those
Something we
rumors are
haven't-
in the air.
Something we have not seen in a while.
This will be the 3rd one.
So I wanted to sit with you as a woman leader. You have been the Commissioner of Tourism, executive leader, executive director, of the legislature, and a former assistant communications director under Farrelly.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on all of these various women leaders emerging in our community?
It's an interesting term that you use, emerging, because they've always been there.
True.
Specifically as regards to the legislature, from the very first legislature, we actually had 1 woman there. What we're seeing now is greater numbers, and we're reflecting more the community that we live in. And we are taking our place in the community. I think it's wonderful. I think it's about time. I think that we are going to see so many good things happen from it because it's going to impact the entire society. It reflects our culture. We are a matriarchal society. We have always been in the forefront of leading our homes, our communities, the villages that we have. And now it's come to fruition that policymakers are becoming more and more women.
It is a beautiful thing to see. I wanted to know, what unique perspectives do you think women bring to this particular role?
As a legislator?
Yeah, as a legislator, but even as leaders in various areas in a community.
Well, let me start with the legislator action. I actually had the privilege of working for Senator Lorraine Berry. And she was the 2nd female president that we had. And as we know, the first one that we had was from St. Croix, Senator Ruby Rouse. But one of the things that I truly appreciated with Lorraine Berry is her ability to command a room, to gain consensus, and to do it still being very feminine and forceful. But I have been privileged to see in my generation a lot of the women whose name we see on the buildings, who we commemorate in this society. I've had the opportunity to meet many of them. I went to school at Niski Elementary, which is now named Alamala Elementary. And she was a friend of my father's who was in education. And I not only dealt with her going on a cruise for vacation, but I dealt with her as a young girl in school and having that influence. We have so many dynamic women leaders, and they impact all of us. I had the privilege of having dinner with Shirley Chisholm.
Wow.
3 times. And the experience that personally has given to me, to have met the woman who ran for president, to have had her at the dinner table and, pass the potatoes,
Right.
So, you go from looking at who impacts your life on a daily basis and who can impact you for the rest of your life.
So, what are your projections as far as women policymakers? We know it's not new, but what are your projections as far as numbers in the legislature and just the community abroad?
I think to a great extent that depends on we, the women who are now in these positions.
All right.
We often in the past have forgotten to mentor someone else and to extend the hand backwards so that we can bring somebody along. This is a trend right now because it's not stable.
Right.
And if we don't make sure that we make it right for the community to want women in these positions, that we don't always stand behind somebody, that we stand in front of them when it's necessary or beside them when it's that time.
Now, I want to ask you about not only just local politics, but we're now seeing for the very first time the second highest ranking position in the US government is going to be held by a woman and a woman of Caribbean descent. What do you think that does for the younger generation all throughout the Caribbean and in the United States?
I think it's phenomenal. I think that we now have, as we used to say, somebody who looks like me.
Yes.
Somebody who thinks like me. I think that it is critical for the world to see that the second highest position in the top nation of the world can be held not only by a woman, but a woman of color.
Yes.
Now the world will see what people of Caribbean descent are about. Now they will see that we actually still have that village. I can't wait for January 20th.
I can't either. Well, thank you so much for coming and sitting and talking with me. I enjoy your perspectives on women policymakers, and I do hope to see that this trend becomes a mainstay.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for asking me. I'm looking forward to it too, and we'll do our part to make sure it happens.
We will.
So I really enjoyed my conversation with Ms. Richards. You know, one of the things that she pushed back on was when I used the word emerging in talking about women policymakers. Because, you know, as to her point, women have always been in politics. But if we look at the last term, the number 1 and 2 vote getters were women, and then in this term, in the St. Thomas district, the number 1 and 2 vote getters are women. So there is some sort of trend. What are your thoughts on the women policymakers that we're seeing, and do you think it's going to continue?
So I actually think it's, like to your point, it's actually coming, not just emerging, but this is really a steady trend, and it's good to see 5 of the 15 Senate seats are being held by women. You know, I'm really impressed also by the new incoming women really setting a trend and really not just barely getting in, but really getting in good position. They're really coming up. They're showing that they have a presence. They're showing that they've been consistent with their presence. I'm looking forward to it, Leslie.
Well, I can see Pam's point. I mean, growing up here in the Virgin Islands, you know people like the Lorraine Berries of the world, who's the longest serving senator continuously in Virgin Islands history. Then the Ruby Rouses, the Ruby Simmons, the Liliano Belardo de Onís, the Alicia Chucky Hansen. So women have always played a prominent part in politics. The one place that we haven't managed to crack the roof is with governor and lieutenant governor, however. And nationally this year, of course, we have history being made with Kamala Harris becoming vice president. So hopefully at some point in Virgin Islands history, that glass ceiling with governor and lieutenant governor will be broken.
I think it'll be broken because we're going to have the 3rd rumored Senate president. And do you all think that's more than a rumor? Do we think that the Senate president seat is going to go to a woman? I do.
I think so. I think so. When you look at just where women are in place of seniority, especially in the St. Thomas district, so of your most senior senators in Donna Fred Gregory and Janelle Soro are both women. Both are, again, most tenured. So I think you're leaning towards one of them kind of leading the pack, which is really exciting again. Really just kind of keeping to set the tone. Virgin Islands women have always been out in the front, and it's good to really see that continuing.
Well, the 3 of the 17 candidates on St. Croix were female. And we have 1, Genevieve Whitaker, making it into the legislature. So her odds were not necessarily the best, but she still managed to make it. Over here, we had 15 individuals running, and we have 4 members of the legislature being female. And I think that that's a good indicator that that might be a trend to come in the past. Although politics in the Virgin Islands has been very male-dominated, there's no question that women have certainly played a role, whether it be behind the scenes in the formation of the political parties here. And I think we know the good saying, behind every good man, there's a woman somewhere. Whether it's his
Absolutely.
mom or his wife.
Absolutely. But I think that this year's election is showing us that, to your point, I think the Virgin Islands is ready for the titular head to be a woman.
That's an interesting point. I would get calls on my talk show about it's time for a woman. And I think that there's enough people that feel that sentiment. It'll be interesting to see which political teams form for the 2022 gubernatorial race.
Yeah, I think, again, at the time where we are in Virgin Islands history, I think a woman really could add a different flavor, really bring a different flair to the office. So again, I continue to say that I'm looking forward to it. As a father of a daughter, I think it sets a great example. I think it shows that women are, not only can women do anything, you belong setting the trend to continue to do it.
Well, when you look at the demographics, more women are registered to vote. It's a 55 to 45 percentage rate. So there is no question, women just have to get their act together and make it happen.
So I really enjoyed my conversation that I had with Ms. Richards, and I equally enjoyed my conversation that I had with you two tonight on women policymakers and their mainstay in our political scene. If you stay tuned, we will be right back.
It feels like now, more than ever, the Democratic majority needs to pull together to tackle these issues, seek creative solutions, and pass legislation that will ensure the advancement of the Virgin Islands within the Caribbean and on the world stage. Here are some thoughts from incoming Senator Genevieve Whitaker on the need for a united government in the Virgin Islands.
There's an old saying, it takes two hands to clap. So in that regard, we'll be sitting down with incoming Senator-elect Genevieve Whitaker, where we'll be discussing her personal legislative agenda and how she sees that working in tandem with that of her colleagues. We'll also be talking about how she plans to impact the overall legislative agenda for the 34th legislature.
Senator-elect Genevieve Whitaker, first of all, thank you for joining us today. Congratulations. You were, not only are you a newcomer to the Senate, but you were also the #2 vote getter. So that is a very big accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Derek, and thank you actually to the people of St. Croix. You know, their confidence in me in putting me in, as their representative, and certainly backed by an amazing team. Supporters that supported me, some of those who were backed all my life, many mentors, as well as persons who just came out and once they met me, just went ahead and gave their vote of confidence. So I want to appreciate all the votes and support overall.
My first question for you is, what is your personal legislative agenda, the top 3 items that you want to attack. Again, as you went out there, you touched those people. I know that's probably influenced you, and of course, your past experiences. So what are your top 3 items for your personal legislative agenda?
In terms of the priorities items, I am very passionate about our youth and our seniors, right? And when it comes to our youth infrastructure, one of my priorities is getting the youth infrastructure in place. That is, I'm very passionate about the Youth Commission really being funded and working with the executive branch in that regard, and even the Youth Senate being funded so we can work on legislative priorities for young people. With our elderly, it has a lot to do with, of course, the effect that the GRS retirement is going to have on them. It's going to have on all of us, but specifically them being in that position as members of the elderly community. The third priority really having to do with economic development, because we can't achieve many of the various goals without addressing our economics. I'm a huge fan. Fan of entrepreneurship. I believe in that. I also believe in us really building an infrastructure where we can begin the process of addressing the retirement crisis. And those are basically my priorities: the youth, the elderly, and really economic development, tying into all of those areas.
So really, I know that's your personal agenda, but it's important, especially as an incoming senator, that you can have an impact on not only the 34th legislature's legislative agenda, but also how do you see that working with the Brian Roach administration to kind of push the Virgin Islands forward now?
I'm a very strategic person in many ways. I think back to my younger years of how I just approached school, how I was able to finish college in 3 years, things of that nature. What I would say is we have to work with strategy, right? We have to come up as a body with legislative priorities. All of us who've been elected by the people, all 15 of us working together, right, to work on these high priority items. Yes, the government needs money. We know this, so we have to work aggressively. They have to, address the issue with the retirement crisis. It's going to affect all of us. The other priority item, as I said, with the youth infrastructure, really addressing violence. My big thing with the whole crime situation is that we need to really start to aggressively, all now, roll out an aggressive 21st century agenda in terms of crime fighting. And really thirdly, looking at what I also examine, because we have to also address the day-to-day needs of the community, as well as we have others out there who are concerned with the basic things, right? Our roads. With the issue of our electricity situation, we have to really examine how we're going to investigate how the assets have been used and really put a lot more, give a lot more power to the PSC, which I understand has been an effort, so that we're regulating WAPA. WAPA has been, over time, making decisions that have not been to our best interests. So we should look at using an audit process as a way to correct an issue, and as a body, issue corrective measures to definitely public works, as well as to the Water and Power Authority.
What are just maybe 1 or 2 opportunities for legislation that you've been that you can already see yourself presenting maybe in the first quarter, second quarter of the 34th legislature?
I'm very big proponent of curriculum development or redevelopment, right? So right now we have courses of study in place. We have some newer courses of study, civics. We have, of course, even going back again to vocational, current education. We have the marine industry, things of that nature. We need to apply the curriculum to that. We can't expect that someone would leave high school not having been exposed to a particular field and then expect them to want to pursue that particular industry.
So Genevieve, I guess as you're preparing now to become Senator Genevieve Whitaker, what is it that our voting populace can expect from you, especially the people of St. Croix, who overwhelmingly supported you in this last election?
You can always expect someone who's going to have an open door policy, and in particular one who's going to spend a great number of effort to reach out to you, right? That's holding the town hall meetings. That's asking you to engage me when we're going to the process of creating bills. Right. A person who's going to always be there to hear you out, and a person who's going to do. I'm doing my very best to engage you, and I represent all people too. I think that's important. I specifically have mapped out a course by which I will be reaching out to every aspect of our society.
That's awesome. So, Senator-elect Whitaker, I know you have a lot of work to do. I really appreciate you for taking the time, not only to speak to us today, but really to speak to the individuals that supported you overwhelmingly again. I know it's been a lot. I know you are prepared. I know you're running 1,000,000 miles a minute, but we appreciate not only you taking this time, but also stepping up to be of service to the people of St. Croix and more so the people of the Virgin Islands.
Thank you, and God bless you, and God bless the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
So I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to Senator-elect Genevieve Whitaker about not only her incoming strategy, but also how she's going to push the legislative agenda forward. As you know, she's held several positions in our community, most recently as a deputy director of the Board of Elections. So it's really interesting to see how she's going to bring that perspective to the legislature, especially as they probe all these departments and agencies that come before them. Melanie, what do you think?
You know, one of the things that I'm looking forward to for the 34th legislature is seeing some substantive legislation. I think we saw a lot of oversight and hearings just being inundated with the things that the executive branch may or may not have been doing. But I really look forward to seeing drafted legislation that really puts forth policies that helps the community and helps all of the citizens of the Virgin Islands. So I hope that these incoming senators can bring some legislation, because we haven't had that many substantive bills that have been passed in the last term.
I could not agree with you more, Melanie. And in fact, Derek, you said something interesting earlier, that the people's agenda must become the agenda of the Democratic Party. And when looking at the legislation that has been put before the people, you kind of wonder, where exactly are our legislators' heads? How in tune are they with the real issues that are going to help to make the Virgin Islands a better place, and the issues that we struggle with each day? I think that there seems to be a disconnect. And while there has been some really good questions, and they have done better jobs at their oversight role in terms of querying the executive branch on issues before them, and they've seemed to be digging deeper. And I think, quite frankly, a lot of that comes from people within the departments that are most familiar with the issues. That's a good thing. But really understanding the issues on a fundamental level that affect our quality of life and proposing legislation to make the Virgin Islands a better place. That's what I'd like to see as well.
So, you know, Leslie, I actually was a former legislative researcher for former Senator Sean Michael Malone. And a lot of times we spent time just really brainstorming about, again, just like you said, legislation that can really push that agenda forward. How can we improve the quality of life of Virgin Islanders, but how can we really begin to push this forward so that everyone can enjoy, not just for one class, not just for government employees or private sector employees. How can everyone benefit from legislation? And I think that's what this group is really going to have to get back to.
Yeah, I agree. And right now we see that the tides are changing. People no longer are just going in and just pressing a button for anyone. So you really have to perform, and 2 years is not a lot of time to perform. And so they have to hit the ground running, and hit the ground running hard, especially if they're going to be proposing any kind of new legislation. We always talk about how our code is a mess, yet it has not been cleaned up in all of the terms that we've had. And so 2 years is a short time, and they have to get busy.
Well, I got to tell you, one of the things, if I were incoming legislator, I would have focus groups when composing any piece of legislation. In addition to just speaking and meeting with the stakeholders, getting them all in a room at the same time, especially when it comes to, I think about education. Parents, educators, the administrative aspect of the issue, and then students. Because sometimes they seem to lack input from, you know, like, why didn't I think about that? And sometimes that thing they don't think about may be the thing that affects a student's ability to perform. And because they haven't had inputs from students on the legislation, we miss out as a people.
You know, I'll say in theory, when you look at the way our democratic system is set up, we have representation from all various groups, right? Even if you look at our own legislature, we have former law enforcement, we have people that have had extensive careers in the private sector, some that have been in the law background, like again, Senator-elect Genevieve Whitaker. So all these people are supposed to be working together, bringing their different perspectives to create legislation and craft legislation, again, to affect each and every Virgin Islander, not just one segment. That's what we've got to get back to. And I think this group is really the group to do so. I think that this incoming senator, this group of incoming senators really has the energy to revamp and get back to the task at hand.
You know, one of the things is you don't have to know it all, but I find that in leading people, you have to know where to go to get the answers. Right. And that skill set, I find, is missing from a lot of our elected officials at times.
Yeah. Well, again, we're happy to talk to Genevieve Whitaker, and we're looking forward to see what she's going to bring to the Senate. But stay tuned, because we still have more.
Well, that wraps it up for another edition of the Business of Politics. Thank you from myself, Derek, and Melanie for spending the evening with us. And a special thank you to all our guests for taking the time to join us and talk about, well, the business of politics in the Virgin Islands and around the world. Until next time, stay safe, stay involved, and stay informed. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.